What's up, guys? Your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson here, and you might notice this recording sounds different than the usual podcast, and that is because I'm sitting outside here in Lockhart, Texas, recording this ad into my iPhone. It probably sounds pretty crappy. Well, I'm doing this to show you something very cool. Many of you guys know that my production team works over at Podsworth Media, and they've been producing my show for quite a while. I get a lot of questions and people asking, who does your podcast? Why does it sound great? And I'm telling you why. It's because the guys at Podsworth are amazing. They've got this brand new online app for taking rough recordings like this and making them a whole lot cleaner and more listenable with just a few easy clicks. It will remove background noise. It reduces plosives, it fixes clipping, which is distortion from recording with the gain up too high, clipping, which is distortion from recording with the gain up too high, which I can promise you I've done many times, and they fixed this for me. It removes clicks and pops, and then also levels out the dialogue, so there's no crazy where the guest sounds too loud or the interviewer sounds too quiet. Here's what you guys can do. All of y'all that are interested in recording podcasts or audiobooks or anything, if you're a pastor and you want your sermon recorded, whatever the case may be, go to podsworth.com and click Get Started. You drag and drop your audio files or click to open your file manager. This also works on your smartphone's web browser. You customize your settings that you want, but the default works fine on most podcast recordings. Then enter code BUCK50. BUCK50 for 50% off of your first order. You don't need an account, just an email address and payment. And you'll get a download link in your email for your cleaned up files. How cool is this? The guys at Podsworth run everything they do through this app before they do anything else to it. So all of my recordings go through this app that we're talking about. It works great. Like I said, any spoken word recordings, obviously for podcasts, YouTube videos, sermons, audiobooks, whatever, it will make awful recordings sound listenable and much more professional. So, like I said, go to podsworth.com and click Get Started. You can use promo code BUCK50, BUCK50, for 50% off of your first order. You can use promo code BUCK50, BUCK50, for 50% off of your first order. Let's get it.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, where this week's episode's a little bit different than what we usually do. I was honored to be a guest on a show called Everyday Orthodox, published by Ancient Faith. And Elissa, the interviewer on this show, did a great job, and we said, let's just do some cross-promotion. She had me on, so I will put that episode on Counterflow, and that's what this week's episode is. It's my appearance on Everyday Orthodox. I don't always feel comfortable doing full episodes on myself, but I do get requests about it from time to time, and I like going on other shows, so that's always a good time. I figured, you know what? Okay, I'll put another episode about myself. I've done it once or twice on here on Counterflow. So this is my appearance on Everyday Orthodox, where we discuss not only my journey, but a little bit my life. We go way back to my childhood. So if that sounds boring or whatever, forgive me, my apologies. But I do sometimes, like I said, get requests to have an episode or two like this. So here you go. This is my appearance on Everyday Orthodox.
It is Sunday, August 13th, 2023, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. I'm Elissa Bjeletich Davis, and you're listening to Everyday Orthodox. We get together here on Sunday nights to get to know Orthodox Christians and to build community through conversation. You know, we are divided up into different jurisdictions. And of course, we're spread out over many regions here in the United States. So we don't we don't always know a lot of Orthodox Christians who go to different kinds of Orthodox churches, right? You can have neighbors right down the street who are Orthodox and never know it because, maybe you're Greek and they're Lebanese and your paths never cross. But here we go. Now we get to meet everybody. I like to think of it as kind of a grassroots unity effort without having to worry about administrative unity or any of those big questions. We can just get to know each other and learn to see each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. And that's church unity right there. So I like talking to Orthodox people. I find it very interesting. I go to coffee hour and I just ask people where they're from, what they've been doing. And you would be amazed at the stories I hear because we have so many immigrants. We have people from immigrant families as well who grew up here, but, with wacky families. And then we also have a lot of converts who've come in all different sorts of ways. People find the Orthodox Church through so many different avenues. It's all fascinating. And so here we are tonight getting to know somebody else. So I'm glad that you're joining us. And keep in mind that you really can join us. You can actually call in if you have any questions for our guests tonight. You're welcome to do that. The number is 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. And you are, of course, welcome to call in. You can talk to Matushka Trudy Richter, who is right here producing the show. And, you can stream us live on YouTube if you like, if you want to see the video. You can also watch us later on YouTube. We're also live on the Ancient Faith Radio app, the Ancient Faith Radio website. We are live on Facebook Live. We're all over the place. So we're glad you're joining us tonight. And without any further ado, let me tell you about our guest. I think you're going to enjoy this program tonight. Our guest is Buck Johnson. And now Buck has a podcast of his own. It is called the Counterflow Podcast. And from what I can tell, I think it started out very political. And then as Buck found Orthodoxy, it became like Orthodoxy and politics all together. But he actually was also for a long time, for more than 25 years, he was a firefighter. So we're going to hear all about Buck's history and what he's doing now and get to know him very well. So without any further ado, Buck, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks. It's good to be here. And I just one small little correction. The 25-year firefighter thing is correct, but I still am. It's
you're still going.
Yet, it's still doing it. It's not yet was a firefighter. It still is technically a lieutenant, but yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. That's really neat. Well, good. Well, I look forward to hearing about that then. Very cool. So where does your story start? Like, where were you born? How'd you start out?
Oh, all the way back then. I was born in Houston, Texas to my mom and dad. They were devout, I suppose at the time, Baptists. And although I was never baptized, interestingly enough. But I was born in Houston and lived there for 9 years or so until they got split. And my mom married a gentleman from California, and my brother and I were headed off to Southern California for a few years. Yeah. And so we can pick up from there, but that's the first big stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So you start out in Houston, Baptist, but not baptized. Very rare.
Yeah.
Very rare. But so when you were 9 and you switched over, did you feel like, was Southern California just a huge shift for you? I mean, did it happen all at once too? Like you moved to California, you got a new stepdad, you got just the whole situation's different?
Yes. And I actually loved it. And I don't mean that in a negative way that my parents split, because I love them, and wait till we get to the part where I want to spoil it. But I loved Southern California. Of course, coming from Houston, the weather was much better. And back then, this was the late 80s. It wasn't the mess that it is now with a lot of things that are going on in Southern California. It was just beautiful. I loved school. I loved my friends. My stepdad was great. And I thought it was awesome. And then I still got to come back to Texas, see my dad, his new wife then, also my grandparents and all of that kind of thing.
Oh, wow. That's neat. All right. So it went well. Transition was good. All of that's good. Did you stay living in California then all the way through high school or no?
Just before high school, my mom missed Texas so bad, despite the weather change. There was so much better out there. So my stepdad got a job transfer to San Antonio, Texas. So that's where I went to high school.
Oh, wow. How did you feel about that? That's a tough age to move, right? Like
It was.
when you really like LA, there's nothing like Los Angeles, right? Like San Antonio is not similar. It's not the same.
No.
Were you like surfing or skateboarding or doing any of those kind of classic
Skateboarding.
California things? Yeah.
Yes, skateboarding. And I had, it's cute looking back, young love, seventh grade or something. I had what I thought, of course, the love of my life, and they're tearing me away from my girlfriend and all of this kind of stuff. So it was heartbreaking, of course. And then of course I get to San Antonio and I was able to roll with that. And then I started loving that as well. So.
Oh, that's good. That's very good. And you went there all through high school? You were in San Antonio?
I did, yes. And this is sometimes an interesting point in my own religious conversion experience. I went to a big, famous megachurch in San Antonio with Pastor John Hagee. I'm sure there are people listening that are familiar with who he is.
I'm sure.
And so that was always, and at the time as a teen, for whatever reason, I was very rebellious as far as my subculture. I was into punk rock and now I'm covered with tattoos. That was always my goal. When I was a teenager, I wasn't allowed to do it, of course. And John Hagee had this like Bible thumping, angry kind of demeanor that I thought was kind of fun as a teenager. And I was like, yeah, this guy's cool. He's really telling it like it is. He's slamming the Bible. And at the time, I find it, now it's kind of funny looking back, but as a teenager, I was like, this is kind of like a cool church. So I even got into that for a little while.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually. So were you not very religious before that and more happened in San Antonio? Or like
Right.
Was your family going to church all the time? And
We did, but it was the one in California the one when I was in Houston, I was too young to even grasp really what was going on. And then California to me was very boring. It was a Presbyterian. Also, I think he was on TV as well, named Lloyd Ogilvie, but very polished and calm and speaking like this. And as, a seventh grader or whatever, you're like, this is boring. And so when I just wasn't into it as much. And then we started in that big church with Hagee, and I was like, this guy's fiery. He's passionate. I like this. And so that's kind of, as I was coming of age, I appreciated his energy and his enthusiasm, to say the least.
oh, that's kind of cool. That's really neat. So were you then kind of a fiery kid, like, alternative punk?
Yes.
Were you?
Yes.
Were you? Yeah, you were in your face, like
Yes.
right there.
Yeah, I was going to punk shows and in mosh pits and things of that nature. Yeah, it was fun.
Wow. Oh, wow. And was that scene pretty big in San Antonio at the time? I don't know much about that because I was in California back then where you had been, but I didn't leave yet. But okay, so mosh pits and all kinds of craziness. And that's cool.
Yes.
What did you, like as a teenager, what did you see yourself doing with your life? I mean, apparently getting tattoos. Definitely a big part of the plan. What else? What did you, I don't know.
It's funny.
See yourself being?
There was never a lot of like longevity of thought. Like I never thought, okay, I'm 16. What will I be doing at 26, 36, 46? Until I hit graduation from high school. You're 18, I suppose. And then everyone tells you back then, just go to a local college and get your basics. Everyone needs that at some point. Get that out of the way. Oh, you know what? I should say this. There's a quick stint where I actually thought I took 2 years of photography in high school, and I got a free ride to Brooks Institute of Photography, which is in Southern California. I don't know if it's still there, but at the time, it was the biggest it was the best, most prestigious photography school in America for sure. And I was into the artsy part of photography. We went to Europe a few times on field trips with the photography groups. And at the last minute, I got cold feet because I don't know, I don't want to brag because I wasn't wise at all, but maybe just a slight bit of wisdom. Wait, you can't really make a big living as a photographer unless you're like a wedding photographer or for a magazine, like, fashion stuff. And I thought, I can't do artsy stuff and make money. So at the last minute, I got cold feet and I turned down the offer. And so I just took a couple of years of basics, and my entire family on my mom's side, every man from the last 100 years probably, were firefighters in Houston. And I had never thought about it in my entire life. Even as close as I was to my grandfather, never asked him about it, never went to a fire station. And one day when I was driving to go see my grandparents in Houston, it just hit me and I was like, I should be a firefighter. That's what my grandfather does. That seems like a cool job. I'll ask him about it when I get there. And that's the first I had ever spoken to him about it. And he was, of course, as was my mom, as was my dad, all for it. Please do this. This is a good job. The retirement's this, and it's rewarding. So that was at 18 years old was my first spark of maybe I could do that. And I did it officially. I started when I was 19 the next year. So I guess it worked.
Wow. And were you firefighting in Houston just like the rest of the family?
I was not. And so as we get to this, I can't on air say this the department I work for now, just because it's all kinds of reasons. So I can't say it. But first I worked for Victoria Fire Department in Texas because I paid my way to get through my own fire academy at a college, and they kept hammering it into us. This just makes you certifiable in the state of Texas. Most of you will never get hired in a fire department. This is the hardest job in the world. So I start looking online. I got certified, found Victoria hiring, applied, got hired, and I thought, well, they said this is really hard. I guess I'll stick here. And then after a year and a half there, I applied to the place that I'm at now, and that also worked out. And it was a smart move, and so I moved to that fire department.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Actually, I know a young man right now who is going into his training and his certification. And he did the same thing. He's like, oh, it's really hard. It's hard to figure out. And so that's encouraging. Maybe it's not. So it's hard to do, but still, I mean, Texas is full of firefighters, right?
Yes.
People are getting jobs doing it for sure.
We always need more. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's great though. That's very cool. I like that you just kind of stumbled into it and you loved it. And
yeah, I know. It's funny. I'd never had this long, because you meet guys that come into the fire department. This is my dream job since I was 12. And I was like, I just thought about it a few weeks ago. But now looking back, we always joke around, 20 years in, what would you do if you didn't do this? And it's like, geez, I don't know what else I could do. This, you start when you're 21 or 19, whatever, and you're in your 40s, and it's like, this is all I know. I've done this for over half my life, so I don't know what else I would do. You start to think of ideas, and then it comes back to, no, this is better though, so I don't want to quit.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. What do you like about firefighting?
The camaraderie. It's like your family. Every third day you go to work with your men and women, and it's just like, you eat together, you work out together, you sleep there, you watch movies together, then you do hard things together, which really bonds you more so. You will find often that the busier fire stations have the closer knit family bonds of sorts between the members because it's just, it's like when you're on a football team or something and you go through this grind and there's kind of a bond that forms where you realize like everyone here has your back. They know you have their backs and whatnot. So it's the family feeling of it's really cool.
That's neat. That's really neat. So are you would you say one of the busier fire departments? Like, are you at kind of a quiet place or are you in a place where there's just always something happening?
It depends on the time of the year. Right now, my fire station is super busy because these brush fires and wildfires and stuff we're having here in Central Texas we're in an area where we know that's going to happen every summer. It's just nonstop. The station I was at prior to this was the busiest station in the department that I worked for. And I was there for 8 years, but I don't need to go back there anymore. You do something for so long, your sleep cycle's destroyed. But it was a very fun time while I was there, I'll say that.
Yeah. And it was a good bonding, I'm sure, because
yes. Yeah.
you're out
lifelong
there protecting
friends.
each other.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really neat. That's very cool. All right. But but in the wintertime where you are now, things settle down. The brush fires settle down.
Yes.
And it's just a little quieter. That's nice.
We're ready for it to settle down by the time it gets cold. Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So over those years of firefighting, when last we were talking about your religious life, you were at the mega church, you loved that, but then you moved, you get out to Victoria. That's a whole different deal, right? Like you left your family, I guess some of your family in Houston, some of your family in San Antonio. What was it like just being on your own at first in Victoria? Was that, because Victoria is not like the big city.
No, it's not. It's not.
From big cities to like LA, San Antonio, these are big places.
Yes.
Victoria. So for those of you listening that have not heard of Victoria, there's a reason. It's because it's real small. It's a tiny little South Texas town, right?
It was a culture shock, I would say, but I was so young and wide-eyed. The fire department life there was so fun. It was a very small department, maybe 4 stations. So I knew everyone. some of the guys looked like my grandfather. There was a few younger people. It was kind of this transition time in that particular fire department where a lot of the old guard was starting to retire and some fresh blood was coming in. But I loved it. And I had a fun time there. It was really busy. I was on an ambulance all the time, but I was 19, so it didn't matter. And as that transition was happening, the part of the story we can pick up from earlier is both parents had ended up splitting with my stepmom and my stepdad, respectively. And in the next year or two, as I'm in Victoria, transitioning also then to my current fire department, my real parents get remarried. And so, so my mom goes from San Antonio, divorces my stepdad, goes back down to Houston with my real dad, and they start working at a bar together that my dad had owned. And I don't know, one thing led to another. And here we are, my brother and myself going to their new wedding.
Wow.
And so that was quite rewarding and nice to happen.
Oh, that's really neat. Well, yeah, there are all these studies that say that couples who divorce, if you interview them 20 or 30 years later, in retrospect, they're like, oh yeah, we could have done something. There are things we could have done. You know, in the moment, it doesn't feel like it, but in retrospect, it often feels like, oh, we probably could have been a little more humble and fixed that. But
yes.
That's really beautiful. I would imagine at your age though, right? If you're like 18 or 19, when your mom and dad both got divorced for the second time, you were probably a little angry about it. Like that would be, I mean, I have 19-year-olds and I would say they don't tolerate that sort of stuff very well. Were you angry at first?
No, it's a pretty crazy story on my mom's side. Basically, I busted my stepdad having an affair. So it kind of had to happen.
It kind of has to happen. Yeah, and if it hadn't, that would have been much harder. Actually.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It was kind of heartbreaking to me because I liked him a lot, and I knew what was going on. I was like, man, and then I'm 18, so I'm not dumb. I got kind of figured it all out, and I was like, geez, why'd you do this? So, of course, it's my mom. She's was my best friend. Is like my best friend, so I had to tell her, and yeah, it was brutal, but it all worked out for better because now when people meet my parents now that find that out that happened, I've had multiple people say, I can't imagine that they were ever divorced. It's so crazy. They're like the perfect couple.
Thank God.
Yes.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. I love that. Yeah, those are rare stories, but every once in a while you'll hear that people are able to bring it back together. And it seems like it's just stronger and more beautiful after having gone through the separation. That's really neat. That's cool. All right. So you're like 18, 19, your parents are getting back together. You're having a great time in Victoria. How long did you stay in Victoria?
About a year and a half, just under that. And then I saw the pay scale of where I'm at now and the difference. And then I had friends in the city that I started working for in the music, because I play music too. So I had musician friends, and I said, you know what? Let's try this. So I gave it a shot, applied, got it. And so in 1998, I started at this current spot. And so that's where I'm just hit my 25-year mark at.
That's awesome. So when you took the job in Victoria, you're thinking like, oh, it's so hard to get a job. Beggars can't be choosers. Like, you didn't compare like salaries across the state and find out like, oh, by the way, this is a very small town with very low pay.
Right.
I mean, low cost of living too, to be fair, but.
It was. Yeah. And it's so funny looking back on how little I made in Victoria. I was so young at the time. I saw how much I would be making, and I thought, I'm not going to know what to do with all of this money. I can't imagine. It's just going to pile up in my account. I didn't know any better, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true, right? Like you get out of college, your first jobs, you're just like, that sounds like an impossible amount. And it's just like, no, it turns out if you would like to, say, own a house or a car or something,
right,
that not to be a whole lot of money at all.
Right.
But, that's cool though. That's very cool. All right. So you just said that you're a musician, but I had no idea. So when did that start in your life? Did you have a love of music as a kid?
Yes. Since I was about 6 or 7, my dad was just up here. I just moved houses here in Lockhart, and my parents helped me. And we were talking about my first albums, and it started, but he's a musician too. So it was just all around this love of music. And so, Yeah, quite early on at 6 or 7, I started getting record albums, and then we moved to tapes. This is, aging me, I suppose, and then to CDs. And I still have, as I moved here to this new house, I have multiple boxes of albums and CDs, and I still have all of my tapes, and I just can't throw them away. I realize that I don't have a CD player again, but if and when I have a child in 20 years, what if he or she, who knows what kind of technology is going to reappear, and they say, Dad, did you keep all of your CD? Because I assume, as was I with my father, that I could pass on a love of music. And so I want to keep all of this. It was the heaviest boxes we moved. And at one point, my mom's like, why are you keeping all of these? But yeah, I got into music at 6 or 7, and I never stopped. I started playing drums in California at age 10, taking lessons there. And I played all over the world, all over this country, since then.
Wow. So you're really actually a very artistic person then. You're a musician, photographer, like you have a lot of, okay, that's cool. That's very neat. So what kind of musician is your dad? What kind of music does he do?
He's always liked stuff of his generation. Elvis is his favorite, but he even likes the Beatles. I know sometimes people say you're an evil Elvis person or a Beatles person. When you combine it, it's evil. No, old country stuff from the 60s, 70s, stuff like that. And he sings though. See, I don't. I only play drums. That's always the joke amongst musicians is you're not a musician, you're a drummer. But that's all I've ever done. I wish I could sing, but it's worked out well for me. I tried to play guitar as a kid, and it wasn't happening.
Yeah. So when you started playing music, I mean, when you're taking lessons, you just kind of, whatever it is. But were you at punk then? Is that what you were doing, or what were you doing?
No, it's even funnier. This will age me.
You're listening to punk, but you're not actually playing it.
Well, when I first started playing, what was popular was glam metal, like Guns N' Roses and Poison and Cinderella. That's what I was so into, and especially in LA where the Sunset Strip was and all of that. So I would go to my drum teacher and say, I want to learn Twisted Sister, or I want to learn Motley Crue. And sure enough, he'd get me the music. He'd teach me how to read it. And, it's like Walk on the Wild Side or whatever, but Motley Crue. And here's the drum music. Buck, here's how you play it. Here's what this hand does. Here's what the foot does. And sure enough, I'd cycle through these songs week after week of what was the popularized glam metal at the time.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if glam metal hadn't been big, if it would have been drums that you had done, right? Because like the drummer for glam is like the star.
Yeah.
The singers, right? But the drum, there was always a drum solo. It was always impressive.
Yep.
Yeah.
I used to practice drum solos. He actually taught me, here's how you twirl your sticks, like the drummer of Poison and all of that kind of thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool. All right. So were you in bands a lot? And you said you traveled with me. Like, tell me about
yes.
that. But when in your life were you doing that?
Once I got into high school in San Antonio, when I was into the punk and this music called ska, I was doing some of that type of thing in San Antonio. And then it's like, by some crazy chance, I discovered my dad's early records, which were Elvis, Sun Records sessions, like the old rockabilly stuff, and Carl Perkins and Ricky Nelson and Roy Orbison. So I started playing rockabilly music, like 50s rock and roll. And lo and behold, I met one of my still lifelong best friends in San Antonio, who was like diehard rockabilly guy with his hair pompadoured up like Elvis. So he and I started a band. In the last 2 years I was in San Antonio, maybe the last year, but we played every weekend, every Friday and Saturday night to packed places, and people were dancing all of the time. It was a lot of fun. And so then I made friends in Austin, the city of Austin, that were in that same kind of rockabilly scene. And I ended up moving to Austin, and I reconnected with them. And so lo and behold, we start doing gigs around Austin. And then that scene is popular in many places in Europe. And then, of course, on the West Coast here too. So we started touring the West Coast, and then, we were making records and stuff, so people knew who we were. And then I started touring Europe, like Holland and France and Spain.
That's so cool. So if we were to look you up, like what was the name of the group that was?
The Horton Brothers is the one.
Brothers?
Yes, that's who
Okay.
we toured with the most. It's two brothers that sing harmony together, like the Everly Brothers.
That's cool.
Was like a 50s rock and roll beat behind it, which I provided. But we would also kind of be a package group where we could not only play together and let the brothers sing, since one played bass and one played guitar. If a front man or front woman wanted to use us as a unit, we could be their band. So we did that quite a bit as well.
Oh, that's neat. That's very cool. So you were pretty well traveled between the photography and the music. Like by the time you were 20, you'd been all over Europe and all over the US, right? Or I guess the western side of the US.
The western side, yeah. We could take short stints because of our jobs. My job, if you work every third day and you take off, let's see, 4 shifts, that really allows you quite a bit of time off. And so, but one of the other guys had a 9-to-5 job. So we'd do like 2 or 3 week stints. So we'd have to be choosy. And it's like, do you want to go up through like the Carolinas or through the Midwest? Or do you want to go to California, Oregon, Washington? We'd always choose that route, of course. So we'd always go through the West Coast, sometimes through Denver, Vegas, that route. And then the Europe packages were kind of thrown our way. So we just took what was given to us. But those were always quite fun too.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. That's neat. All right. Well, we are going to take a very short break. And then we're going to be back with Buck Johnson. And we're going to hear more about his story. Remember, you're welcome to call in. The number is 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. We will be right back.
Many of us are concerned about finding a safe place to live in the world, legally eliminating our tax bills so that we're not funding a war, especially a war that is closing down our church, to say the least, how awful that is. Well, Mikkel Thorup, host of the Expat Money Show podcast, is hosting a free online event at expatmoneysummit.com. They're going to discuss things like, well, legally eliminating your tax bill, like I said, international wealth protection, second passports, offshore banking. It's going to be the largest offshore event in the world. Now check this out. You want to hear some speakers? First and foremost is one of my heroes, Ron Paul. The great Ron Paul will be speaking. But check this out. Peter Schiff will be speaking. The great Tom Woods will be speaking. Friend of the show, Tom Luongo, will be speaking. Doug Casey, Mark Faber, Jim Rogers, plus international lawyers, offshore precious metal dealers, foreign real estate experts, and much, much more. You can pick up a free ticket. That's free at expatmoneysummit.com. Again, it's Mikkel Thorup, host of the Expat Money Show podcast, hosting a free online event. Pick your ticket up at expatmoneysummit.com. Let's get back to the show.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight with Buck Johnson. I just found the Horton brothers in the Billy Chronicle, and I'll put that on the Facebook page when I can post on the Facebook page, because they keep changing how you do like the business accounts, and they're all a mess.
Sure. Oh, yes, they do.
I keep trying to post it, and it's a mess. I feel like I'm 85 when I'm trying to do this page.
I know the feeling.
It's terrible. But at any rate, well, that is really cool. I did not expect you to have this whole history of traveling around and playing music. It's just, that's awesome. So over those years, were you, the music scene and all this, like, were you particularly religious at that point? Or were you kind of early 20s doing other things, right?
A lot of other things. Yeah. It's, everyone has a story and it works out, hopefully, in the end. But I was actually what I would have called at the time a devout atheist for many of these years. So much so that, yes, because I was always very much into politics. So I was reading political books constantly, a lot of libertarian stuff, some right-leaning stuff, but I got heavily into libertarianism. And one of the problems with the libertarian circles, broadly speaking, I'm not trying to pigeonhole anyone specifically, but it's such a thin legal definition, meaning we just don't want you to hurt people or don't take their things. Anything else is fair game. Well, when you do that, you're in a lot of negative influences and so a lot of degeneracy and things, because I'm not hurting anyone. And so unfortunately that scene can be corrupted by negative influences. And so I was a heavy reader. So I slowly started reading atheist books, the God Delusion and things like that. And geez, forgive me. But at the time I was into it. And so that's for a long time, I was pretty much like, yep, I'm an atheist and I'm a libertarian and I know about this scene in politics. And I was talking about it with friends constantly, probably annoying a lot of people. But I was heavily into that stuff.
Yeah. Did you read like a lot of Ayn Rand? Did you? Yeah. I had those years too. I was not an atheist, but I was very big on Ayn Rand and libertarianism and like,
yes,
well, if nobody takes care of the poor people, then we get what we deserve. Like, rather than people, we should just get what we deserve, and like, kind of depressing now that I think about it.
Yes. Yeah.
But at 22 or so, like it just feels smart.
Yes. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it felt smart until about, 2020 to me, as embarrassing as that sounds. So, yeah.
No, it's not. So you were an atheist all the way to 2020?
Yes.
Okay. So, and how long, out of curiosity, did the music career go on? Like, are you still doing music?
I still do gigs sometimes.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Not as many as I used to do at this age. And living in Lockhart, you don't always want to drive to some far north Austin bar and play till 2 a.m. And now that I go to church every Sunday, I don't want to be up on a Saturday night till 2 a.m. So I'm more picky with the gigs I take at this point. But I still do it. I actually play around here in Lockhart sometimes with a lot of awesome musicians that moved here. And so we've reconvened and started doing some gigs around Lockhart, which is, the gig's 5 minutes away and we're done at 11. I'm in for that. I can do that.
Well, a lot of our listeners might not know about Lockhart. So this is like a small town, kind of southeast of Austin, right? And it's the place where all the coolest Texas barbecue is. It's sort of known for barbecue. But as Austin has gotten super expensive with the arrival of all the tech and all the California transplants, people are moving, like artists and musicians. I think like Bastrop and Lockhart have really benefited from that, right? Like that's very cool.
Yes.
That's really neat. Now, you're at the same parish with my friend Cece Jensen. Do you guys ever play together?
We haven't yet. She actually needed a drummer one night, and I think I was working at the fire station or something. I was upset. She kind of gave me a little crap for like, come on, I need it. And I was like, I would love nothing more than to do this gig, but I have to work. I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, you'll have to make it happen because, announce it somewhere. I want to know about it because that would be fun. Okay. She's super cool. I love her and I love your parish actually. So, but as we were talking, you were just recently an atheist. So what happened? Like, how did you even come across Orthodoxy? Or am I skipping anything? Like,
no,
become a podcaster before 2020?
Yeah. That started in 2018, I think. Yeah, 2018. And I was doing strictly libertarian, for the most part, politics and political interviews with people. And that kind of led me towards this direction, as strange as that might sound. In fact, I did a show called the Libertarian to Orthodox Pipeline, because that is quite a thing now.
Yeah.
And so it was a thing for me. And that's I can get into exactly how it happened if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that generally speaking, it makes sense because libertarians are people who are willing to sort of step outside of the mainstream, right? Like they're willing to question the idea that there are just two ways of doing things. And so they're going to come up with other ideas, whether they're good or bad. They're open-minded, right? I had a priest who would go to like Wicca conferences and he was like, you find more truth seekers. And so I feel like when you step away from the mainstream, you're going to find a whole lot of people who are maybe more open-minded and sort of contrary to what you would think, more likely to be willing to listen to an Orthodox priest or something. So,
I think you're spot on. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so as 2020 happened, and I've had so many strikes on my YouTube page, I'll be very careful of what we can and can't say. I already know it. I already know the tricks. As 2020 happened, there was a friend of mine who is on the Royal Path podcast with my spiritual father, Father Turbo, and his name's Cyprian. And I became friends with him. I'd interview him and we'd talk, and I'd hear him on other shows. He was talking a lot about the events that started in March of 2020. And at some point it hit me like, he has such a better grasp on what's going on than a lot of even the libertarian political people I have on do. Somehow he's looking at this through a spiritual lens, not just like a legal or a tyrannical lens. And so because I've been focused on that, well, they can't tell us to do this. That's against our rights or whatever. And I started talking to Cyprian, and every once in a while he would throw in that he's Orthodox. And he would mention his spiritual father was Father Turbo. And finally, at the end of one interview, I said, we were done recording and we started talking. And I said, you sure see what's going on much better than most people I speak with. And it's like you have this spiritual angle or something. And that seems to make sense to me. And he said, if you look at what's going on right now in a materialist lens, you're lost. It's not going to make any sense to you, and it won't ever make any sense to you. This is a spiritual event. And I said, well, what is Orthodoxy? And he starts explaining it to me. Again, this is offline, so he can be very upfront with me. And I said, what do I get? What books? Because I come from the libertarian world where what book do I read so I can become smarter? And he said, get a book by Father Seraphim Rose called God's Revelation to the Human Heart. Very short book. You'll do fine with it. Cool. All right. As soon as we got off the Zoom call, I ordered it. And then that came in, and I actually didn't read it for a few weeks because I feel horrible saying this. I saw Father Seraphim, and I'm like, this is weird looking, the long beards and everything. I didn't know anything about Orthodoxy. And so then another mutual friend who does a podcast, Matt Erickson, he now goes to church with me at my parish. He was in California at the time he does the Real Kingfield podcast, and he kept saying stuff about Orthodoxy. And he also happened to be one of the people that I kept hearing. I'm like, he has a better grasp at what's going on here than anyone else besides Cyprian. And they both keep talking about Orthodoxy. What the heck? So I start talking to him about it. Then finally I read this book, Father Seraphim Rose, God's Revelation to the Human Heart. And it was like, it floored me. And it was basically a speech he gave, I believe, in Northern California to a university crowd. So, but it was like nothing I had ever read about Christianity in my entire life, nothing I'd ever heard before. It hit me completely different. And I could feel it. There was like a warm fire like in my heart. And I was like, what is this? This is wild. And right at that time, I won't dox him, but it's someone I know, followed me on Twitter and reached out. He had an alias. He didn't have his full name. And he reached out and said, I heard that you live in Lockhart. I would like to invite you to my parish. It's an Orthodox parish. And I was like, who is this? What? And I said, that's weird. I've been driving. So I started driving by the parish, by the way. I knew it was here. I started driving by, and I would sit in my golf cart outside it. And I was like, I don't want to go in. They probably think I look weird. I don't know the traditions. I don't know what to tell these people. I'm this big guy with tattoos. They're going to be like, what the heck's this? So I wouldn't go in. And I said, weird. Wait, who is this? It's a Twitter thing. I have to be careful about these people reaching out to me. And he said, no, I go to that church. I said, do you live in Lockhart? Let's meet up. No, I don't live in Lockhart. Okay. He said, but Father Ignatius is truly special. And once you go there, you're going to understand why I go there. And I said, weird. I just read this book by Father Seraphim Rose. And he says, well, Father Seraphim Rose is like my family kind of patron saint of sorts, even though he's not technically a saint. And he said, and he's on the wall there at the church as an icon. And he said, the fact that you're reading that book and it spoke to you, and I felt the need to reach out to you, and Father Seraphim Rose is a big deal at that particular church. He's like, this is all lining up for you. Like, you understand, right? And I was like, this is weird. Okay. And so I went.
Wow. Well, I mean, the thing is that in Orthodox people, we see this in our lives, especially like I look back and I just see all of these little signs of God, like sort of trying to bring me in and trying to bring me, and it's just, and they all just line up just right. And it's God's providence. And I think the first time you hear somebody talk about it, it's like, okay, these people are goofy. But then over time, you start to see it like, no, God cares about me like that. Like God's going to reach out and he's going to do what he's got to do to reach me. That's beautiful. You're an atheist and all of a sudden, you're reading these books, you're talking to this guy about his church. Was there some voice in your head just going like, oh, back away? Or when?
No.
No.
Once I read that God's revelation to the human heart, it was like, oh my goodness, I looked at this all wrong. Like I was wrong. And just the way the Father Seraphim Rose spoke in that book, it's so easy to read too. It's just it's like a half an inch thin. I could not believe what I was reading, but I was believing it, if that makes sense, and I thought, where have I been? Like, I am so dumb. Everything I was thinking is dumb and wrong.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. That is amazing. But, okay, so then where'd you go next? Was it all just in the parish or did you start being a podcast guy? I would have thought that maybe you would all of a sudden be listening to like Orthodox.
Oh, I did.
Yeah. Okay.
I was started as I did with libertarianism. And I think people that are interested in the intellectual side of some of these things, and let me just divert real quick. I'm more than interested really in the spiritual side of this. However, there is part of my personality that likes the intellectual, the history. And so I started reading about Orthodoxy immediately. Started listening to Lord of Spirits, those guys, Father Turbo and the Royal Path, Ancient Faith Radio. A lot of these, I just started looking, Father Spirit and Bailey. I just started looking online for Orthodox stuff and then researching the history, then book after book, Amazon, click, book, click, here's a new book. And once I like the history of things. I like the purity of things I get into. For instance, I told you I played 50s rock and roll. And so I first came across 80s rock and roll or 90s rock and roll. Then I went to the 80s. Then let's go back. 70s, I like the punk stuff. Let's go back. Beatles, where'd they get it from? Let's go back. Elvis, where'd he get it from? Let's go back. And so I always do that. And I did the same thing even with libertarianism because in a sense, that started in 1776 in a way, right? So why did I care about what Mitt Romney had to say if I could go hear what Ron Paul had to say? And he's echoing what would be like the church fathers, but it was the American fathers, right? So when I started finding Christianity, it was like, well, what happened in 1500? Okay. What happened in 1054? What happened before that? So I started going further and further, and it was like, oh, this stuff was in the book of Acts, like this church that we go to. And the first bishop of the Antiochian church was Peter. Wait, Peter from the Bible, Simon Peter. Yeah. And so I was like, why didn't anyone ever tell me this before? And that's not to blame anyone else. I would not have been ready for it before, right? And then there's also the fact that Orthodoxy is a bit of a, we're an extreme minority, and certainly in the West. And so, yeah, it was just like my mind continues to be blown, but it was blown big time immediately back then. And then once you see the truth and hear it and experience it and really feel it and live it, you can't, there's no turning back now. You can't stop. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Now you've mentioned, that you sort of repented of libertarianism almost, it sounds like.
Yes.
What is it about libertarianism to you that is sort of, is it incompatible with Orthodoxy? Is it just that you've grown in a different direction? Like what has that process looked like for you?
My first instinct is to say that yes, it is incompatible with Orthodoxy, but I would really say that if you're Orthodox, you don't need libertarianism because Orthodoxy is complete. It's a worldview. I don't like even really to say it's my religion. It's this truth. It's just the history of the world, the universe, the creation. And it comes down once you realize all of that. It's a worldview. So I don't have to have a political label of any sort anymore because you're just scraping the surface. Oh, I'm a Democrat or I'm a libertarian. It's like, but what's your real worldview? And just to say, I still have libertarian instincts. Sure. I think there should be no income tax. I think there should be no war unless it's absolutely necessary. So yeah, things of that nature, I lean to libertarian in my instincts, but you don't need a political label if you're Orthodox.
And it's interesting, right? Because once you, in my experience, coming into the Orthodoxy, once you see it that way, it's so hard to understand why everybody doesn't see it.
Yes,
you're just like,
I know.
well, how come there are all these Christians who are so fired up about their political party when, here's Christ is eternal, right? Like this is so much, everything is so much bigger than American politics.
Yes.
Yes, I can have an opinion on politics. And Orthodox people don't all agree on politics, but that's partly because there is no Orthodox politics, right?
Right.
It's so much bigger than that. And what is really meaningful in life is so much bigger than that. And then, I don't know, reminds me of my dad. My dad was super political, libertarian also. But when he was dying, all of a sudden, for the first time ever, he realized politics didn't matter, right? Like there's something about eternity. And when you touch eternity, so that's quite interesting. So what happens with your podcast then? Because here you have this podcast on libertarianism, and it's so, I would imagine, like incredibly political, but you became less political. Did the podcast have to shift with you? Were people mad about it?
I think I might have lost some listeners, but you also gain a lot once. By far, the biggest demographic that I get feedback from are Orthodox people, or how cool is this? People that have now followed my quote unquote journey and have taken the same steps because they listen to me for the libertarian stuff. And now as I get guests on that speak to them in certain ways, we know who's really speaking to them, but through people, they've, now I'm curious, they'll write me, what book should I get? Or what should I'm always like, just find a parish, find your local parish, go to it. But it's neat to see that a lot of listeners have come along and now are Orthodox because of that. So that's cool. No one ever reached out and said I'm mad or this is, BS or something, but the listenership sunk a little and then started going back up. So I don't know how to translate that or what that means. But I will also say I did make a conscious decision to say, this is a podcast that I have. I am not a libertarian. I'm Orthodox, and that's what we're doing. It was slow, and I just released a political podcast last week. I still like that stuff. And I always, if I tackle a political issue, I look at it through an Orthodox lens, or at least I get my guest that I know already does that to interpret things politically through Orthodoxy. And so that still reaches, like you said, how libertarians are always have more of an open mind or interested in maybe the getting off the neither left nor right, more what other path is there besides the typical stuff we're fed. And so I think when you look at things through an Orthodox lens, it can speak to those people too. And they can kind of go, oh, yeah, I didn't think of it in those terms, but it makes sense. And then they get curious, like, so what is this Orthodox thing? And that's interesting that these people, a lot of times they'll say, well, these priests are so based or whatever. And they're, it's not like a TV preacher. And I think once people that are interested in truth, because libertarians oftentimes are seeking truth, they just think they found it at libertarianism and they stop there. And so if you could just open a different door for them and be like, look over here, this is kind of the direction you're headed in, but it's going to throw you for a loop. But I think that we can find some similarities here. And if you're a deep thinker or you appreciate original history and things of that nature, you'll like this too.
That's really neat. That's cool. What a great opportunity to bring people along on that journey.
Yeah, it's been cool.
And to introduce people to Orthodoxy who might not have otherwise heard of it, because truly, we always say the world's best kept secret, right? Which is really fortunate that we are not better at putting ourselves out there and appearing to be another option list of options. But so you mentioned the libertarian to Orthodox pipeline. Tell me a little bit about like how you see that and what you think is happening. Because I know, especially since 2020 in particular, we do see a lot of, sometimes they call it the Pajot-Peterson pipeline or Peterson-Pajot pipeline, right? Like there are various different people who are really attracted through politics, usually, to a conversation that happens to have an Orthodox person in it. And then before you know it, they're getting sucked in and they're listening to Lord of Spirits. And then there you go.
Yes.
But what is your take on that?
Well, a lot of it, I think, is what you touched on earlier, is that libertarians are seeking some sort of truth, and they're willing to accept things that aren't necessarily on mainstream news, right? And so I kind of look at like megachurch, the megachurch Christianity. I'm not knocking anyone. This is just a description. Megachurch Christianity and, like, let's say generic Republicanism and generic Democrat Party is kind of what we're fed. And so naturally libertarians are trying to look underneath that and find a different route. And so if you look in a certain direction, you might find orthodoxy is a different route. And there is a lot of crossover. Like Pajot's big in these scenes. And I think when people, this happened to me and it's happened to many people I know in the political scene, when they saw what happened in 2020, even if they were atheist, which I was, it hit me like, there's actual real evil. This is not just politicians going, whoops, I screwed up. Darn, maybe I'll get it next time. It's like, no. This is propaganda on the largest scale we've ever seen in my lifetime, by far, way bigger than any war that's happened. And it hit me like, this is actual evil. There has to be something good. There has to be like goodness to counter this evil. There has to be. Otherwise, this is going to be nihilism and we're all done for. And so then naturally I found Seraphim Rose's book, Nihilism, also, and read that, and which spoke to me. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And looking for truth and goodness, I found orthodoxy. And I think voices like mine, and this is getting big, I don't like to call it internet orthodoxy. I don't like that term because there's a lot of negativity out there too. But there are voices like Pajot that just it's like they drop these little pieces of crumbs that make you curious, and you start to get hungrier as you eat more and more, and it leads you down the correct trail, hopefully the correct path, right? And so I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I enjoy Pajot because he'll do like these little videos where he'll just kind of drop like a patristic reading of a well-known biblical story or something. And he's just like, hey, there's more over here at this church.
That's right.
It's like, I have a brother who goes to mega churches and he's really enjoying Pajot. And I'm like, well, there you go. It's fascinating to me too, though, because within Orthodoxy, it's not like everyone agrees politically, and yet people are drawn through politics into it, right? So you would expect, you're going to get over here and everybody's going to be on the same page. But we're all over the place. We have people on every side and thinking every way about things. And I imagine that that's a good sign. I guess that means that we're on the right path, I suppose.
Yes, the royal path. I hope so.
Yeah. I hope so. God willing. Absolutely. So, so you're still working as a firefighter. You've been going 25 years. Like, what is a normal career for a firefighter? Because
you could retire. Usually guys will do about 27 to 30 years, something like that.
All right.
If you start old, they'll quit at 20 or to 25, but I started when I was 21 at this department. So everyone, the guys will, you started 21, man, you're lucky. You can work till you're 50 or whatever. Because even at 50, it's like, that's weird to retire. Like you're done working. And no one, people retire at 70 a lot of times. So yeah, it's fortunate that I fell into this. It's nice.
That's really nice. So as you get older, do they move you to tasks that are like more administrative and training, or are you still out there just like
it's up to you,
heavy hoses and going for it? How about you?
Yeah.
What do you do?
I'm a lieutenant, and so I still do most of the work, but I shouldn't say that. If my guys or girls listen to this and I go, you don't do most of the work. I direct where the work needs to happen, but I still go in the building that's burning, and I still have the air pack on and all the stuff.
Yeah.
But luckily, it's a young man and a young woman's game. I'm 46, and to just constantly be pulling these hose, I did it for a long time. But I have younger, fitter people to do that, but I have to just make sure they're safe. I have to look at the picture from a macro perspective while they're doing the task-oriented things. So that's how it happens.
That makes sense. That's so neat. I mean, thank you for being a firefighter. Really, like you guys are on the front lines. I know 9/11 brought so much attention to this idea, right? And it's true. the firefighters are the ones who are running toward the disaster. And they're toward
right.
fire. They're running.
Yes.
And I don't think many of us thought about it that way. Like, unless you had firefighters in your family, it was just like, oh, the friendly firefighter in the parade, you know, and then you see something like that and you realize like you guys are just always running toward danger. And
when I picked Counterflow as my podcast title, part of that was why, because the music I was always into flowed counter to the mainstream. The politics I was into flowed counter to the mainstream. Now, the Orthodox Christianity flows counter to the mainstream. Right. And as my job, I went in flowing counter to everyone that's running out. So it was kind of all fitting.
That's really neat, actually. That's kind of beautiful. That just summarizes your whole...
Yeah.
That summarizes everything, doesn't it?
My whole life, yes.
I love that. That's amazing. Not many people can find one word to summarize just everything about themselves. That's beautiful. I love it. I love that. Well, that's very cool. So you may retire, though, in a couple of years, you think?
That'd be nice.
Like retire at 50? Amazing. What will you do? Are you going to like sail?
Well, hopefully I'll be married with a kid. So I'll homeschool a kid and help out churches and in sailing around I don't know about the world, but maybe, jet skis or wake surfing or something like that. That would be fun. I don't know.
That's
I'll always, and I can focus on the podcast too, of course.
Now, do you already have someone in mind to marry, or are you like just trying to figure that out? Or is there no comment?
No, I can comment. Yeah, I mean, I have someone in mind.
Oh, excellent. Very nice. Well, congratulations. I'm glad to hear it. That's very cool. That's very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the program tonight. This was a blast.
It was. Yes. Thank you.
That was really fun. And so actually this will be cross-posted on Counterflow, right? So
yes, it will.
This podcast on Counterflow or over here. So, and we'll put a link to Counterflow on the Facebook page in case you guys are interested in hearing it. And anyway, thank you, Buck. Thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And come on back next week. We'll get to know another everyday Orthodox Christian. Good night.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that little chat I had with Elissa. And let me know with your feedback what you thought of it. And even if you didn't like it at all, you can let me know that as well. As for this show, counterflowpodcast.com, you can follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. Go to the YouTube page. You're probably watching this, I hope, on the YouTube page. They premiere every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Central Time. So until next week, y'all have a good one. See ya.
You get split in half, like on the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.